Will, what's going on today?
We are wrapping it up here. Another signing day in the books. Just not really the same. We talked a lot about that this morning. Just just not the same as it used to be for someone who grew up working for ESPN and 24/7 Sports and covering football recruiting and doing all that. Seeing the wall-to-wall coverage that used to be on ESPN all day and kind of is all taking a back seat, I guess, to the transfer portal. Not like it was 10, 12, 14 years ago. Totally different signing day. And I think in a way it kind of almost diminishes a little bit each year. And now we've talked about it and kind of debated it as to, with the transfer portal, how long are you going to keep? We used to get really excited about these recruits and say, man, I can't wait to see them develop. Can't wait to see them in 2 or 3 years with another stack of recruits. Now you don't know if you're going to have them. How long are you going to have them?
Yeah, and we're too early in the process to figure out what do those numbers look like. Does a successful recruiting class, do you keep 75% of it 2 years later, 3 years later, 50% of it, 30% of it? What's going to be the standard? What's going to be the expectation for a big time program to be able to hold on to its original class? You're right. This transfer portal has taken everything over. And I think many of us are hoping that while it's just escalating, this is the year it's really escalated at a huge rate, that at some point it's going to settle. There's going to be a recognition maybe there's going to be reports and feedback that's going to come back to these players at some point to say, hey, this is how it's turned out, that it's not always the grass is greener on the other side, that maybe you do have a good situation. Maybe you should fight for that job. Maybe you should, be patient with your coaches and kind of ride this out and see if things work out and if you continue to grind. But we won't know that for maybe a couple years here.
No, yeah, and it's the evolution of college football as we know it, and how things are changing. I mean, look at whoever. How many years ago? Just kind of going back to Ohio State, a starting quarterback. Whether you liked him as an Ohio State fan or not, on a starting quarterback for Ohio State transferring out, Dylan Gabriel throwing for what was it, 6,500 yards in 2 years and 55 touchdowns, basically being told to hit the transfer portal because they were going with a true freshman. Just all kinds of just crazy things that we used to not see. Malachi Nelson at Southern Cal. I mean, what the 2021 recruiting class, 2021 class, 8 of the top 10 quarterbacks transferred. I mean, that is just crazy. So it's a different time. We're still kind of hammering it out as to what college football will look like moving forward, but it's wild.
It is. And these recruiting rankings, I still think mean a lot, but they don't mean everything like they used to. So to your point, if you look at the 247 Sports total composite rankings, the total roster talent composite rankings, you're basically, if you look at that ranking from the beginning of the college football playoff, it shows you the college football playoff. It shows you Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, Clemson, Oklahoma. They're almost listed in order of appearances, basically. It is so tied, the recruiting success, to the success on the field. However, transfer portal, how many of these guys are still going to be around? How many teams are supplementing themselves? And, Michigan's making up for more of a top 15 recruiting class year after year with great transfer portal additions. So where does Shane Beamer stand on that front?
Well, I think for a school like South Carolina, you get as many high school recruits as you think can help and make an impact. And again, it's to the point now where you don't know how long you're going to have them. So I think even as a high school player, you're trying to gauge. Maybe they only help you on special teams, but for a high school recruit, you're trying to get that guy in. And again, like I said, it might just be special teams, but he helps you in year one, and then you kind of backfill with transfer portal kids. You just showed that 17 recruits. That's a lower number. I think the average number of recruits was right around 23 or 24, which is about what it normally is. It is interesting to see Georgia with 27 because you don't have a 25-man cap anymore on recruiting. You have an 85 scholarship cap that has to be met by July 31st, August 1st, when players are set to come back for the fall semester. And so that's interesting from that standpoint, because I think what you're seeing with Georgia is just, hey, we're going to take as many great players as we want, as we can get, and then what we're going to end up doing is basically we're gonna have a tryout, and the best players will rise to the top. So if we want to sign 35 of the top players in America, so be it. We'll have a tryout, and if you get beat out and you get cut from that 85-man limit, that's what you do. And I think in that standpoint, South Carolina can use the transfer portal to go out and find guys who, yeah, maybe they didn't work out for Georgia or Alabama or someone like that, but you can get still a high quality player that's been in a college program and an elite college program, a college strength and conditioning program. So I think you go out again for Shane Beamer. You find what you can. 2 5-stars in this recruiting class for South Carolina, an offensive tackle and Josiah Thompson, and defensive end and Dylan Stewart. You land several other. South Carolina's got a really good class. You land several others there, and then you backfill again with prospects from Rocket Sanders from Arkansas. Guys like that. Kyle Kennard from Georgia Tech. That's kind of how you have to do it.
Yeah. After a couple of these transfer portal cycles, Will, I thought I had this thing read, and I didn't, because I thought, okay, we're starting to see like basically 2 categories of transfers aside from quarterbacks, because only one plays, so it's a different deal. With the rest of the players, I thought, okay, what we're seeing is either number one, somebody was lowly regarded as a high school recruit, maybe because he just was overlooked or just hadn't blossomed yet, gets signed by a group of 5, goes to a Sunbelt team, a Conference USA school, and just lights it up. And it becomes a really good player for 2 or 3 years. And then, boom, we see this all over the place, elevates to a Power 5 prominent school. Or you've got a situation where a guy's a top level recruit. He goes to Georgia, he goes to Oregon, he goes wherever, and sits through maybe one season, doesn't see any playing time as a freshman, and then maybe, and I especially saw this last year after spring practice, sees the writing on the wall, has the talk with the position coach, with the head coach, okay, sees it's not looking good for me going into my sophomore year. All right, I'm hitting the transfer portal. But now this transfer portal cycle, we're seeing players who obviously they're established. They're good players. They're putting up numbers. They've got a spot at their current school, but they're still waving goodbye. So that's got to be NIL related.
Yeah, I mean, I do think it is. I think, and I think the vast majority of them, it is NIL related. But I also think you have the opportunity to go and join an elite program. And we're being naive if we don't think there's nefarious tampering happening behind the scenes with coaches contacting, say, a high school coach of an elite prospect and saying, hey, just saying, if player X wants to enter the transfer portal, he'd have a spot here. There's really no other explanation for Riley Leonard from Duke entering the transfer portal and instantly putting a do not contact and basically being known that he was going to end up at Notre Dame. And there's other players. I just use that as one example, but I think with all that being said, it's what do you do to correct the situation? We could spend the whole rest of the day. We could avoid recruiting and spend the whole rest of the day on trying to fix NIL and the transfer portal and which one needs to be fixed more. But it's the truth of the matter is this is college football now. Roster retention. You basically have a roster for 1 year, and don't plan after that. You have a roster for 1 year, and whatever you can do, you better win in that 1 year and make the most of the best roster you have, because it's not going to be the same. Look at Southern Cal. They do not have Caleb Williams next year. They were probably planning on Malachi Melson, maybe someone else. I don't really know. I didn't pay enough attention to the depth chart there at Southern Cal. But whatever it was you were thinking, that roster is now completely different. It's going to be different at South Carolina. It's going to be different across the board for a lot of schools. So you have to win in that year. You can't rely on player development for 3-4 years anymore.
Okay, well, you made this phrase a couple times. You got to win this year. Well, Shane Beamer's coming off 5-7. Has any thought about his capability of handling that program changed in the last 3 months?
I think, yes, yes. Not my personal opinion, but of course, in this day and age, again, with the evolution of college football and Oklahoma and Texas coming into the SEC and doing away with divisions and the NIL era, transfer portal era. Yeah, when you go 5-7, and it was a disappointment. I think a lot of people were hoping for 7-5. You absolutely blew a Florida game that you should have won. The offense was pathetic, to put it nicely, against Clemson. Down the stretch, yeah, there are going to be questions. Now, is he on the hot seat? I think it would take a total meltdown, a 2-10-esque type season. They're three of their four non-conference games. Clemson is a fourth non-conference, but three of the four next year are Old Dominion, Wofford, and Akron. So a 2-10 would mean you would lose to one of those other non-conference games, which would be ugly. You'd go winless in the SEC likely. Yeah, that could get you fired. But I don't think his seat is that hot. But I do think, yeah, there's questions. This is the first time Shane Beamer's had to face adversity. Last year, we kind of all ignored the bowl game. He had beaten Tennessee and beaten Clemson, back-to-back top 10 victories, and people, they went to the Gator Bowl, played a great game against Notre Dame, just couldn't quite pull it out. Some of the defections we talked about played a role in that. The year before, they were 6-6, but they beat North Carolina in the Mayo Bowl, and people were excited the last 2 years in offseason. Now there's a lot of questions. Yeah, what are you going to do in this new era of college football? Can South Carolina compete? What is South Carolina's place in college football? And I think there's a lot of schools trying to figure that out right now.
Yeah, and fortunately for him and a ton of others, they don't have to compete directly with Kirby Smart. It's more about let's win 10 games and get to this college football playoff. And that's how coaches are going to be judged going forward, not based on conference championships, and that's not the route to the playoff. So there's got to be a little bit more hope because of the new playoff format.
I think if South Carolina had gone 7-5 this year, I mean, you're just talking again 2 games. Maybe they beat
Yep.
North Carolina at the beginning of the season and then hold on to that Florida game. Yeah, there's probably more hope right now. That's the stage we are in, the fast food age. I want it now. I want it hot, and I'm ready to move on to the next thing. And for South Carolina, yeah, when look, South Carolina's been to a bowl a lot this century. I mean, again, these last 23 years, obviously having 41 bowls helps tremendously. But they are a team that's used to playing in bowl games, lower mid tier bowl games. But again, practicing right now and getting ready for something like an Outback Bowl or a Gator or a Mayo or an Independence. And they're not. We're not. You don't have anything to talk about. Thank goodness the basketball team's 11-1 right now, or 10-1, 10-1 right now. So otherwise, there might be some really grumpy people. They've done okay in the transfer portal. They're holding on. They're holding on to they've held on to the recruiting class, as this guy Jordan says right here about Dylan Stewart, held on to him. That's big for South Carolina. That's what you have to have right now for this program to have some hope. I'm interested to see how the next 9-10 months go. We on our radio show, we do what's called a vibe check. We say, where are you at? 1, 2, 4, or 5. No 3. Can't be in the middle. Can't be a 3. Are you down on it? Are you excited for it? And right now, it's a lot of twos. A lot of twos. They want to see it get done.
Yeah, this time last year, this conversation's focused around Nicholas Harper because he was the talk of the town, and of course, at the top of the board is a 5-star. But Dylan Stewart's the 5-star in the class right now. So, looking at the board, you mentioned a few of these guys. Who are you in addition to Stewart? I would think that would be the obvious choice. So, who are some of the guys that stand out that could be impact guys immediately?
The fourth one on your list right there is one I'm very intrigued with. Fred Johnson out of Norfolk, Virginia. South Carolina did a good job of getting him into camp when nobody knew of him. And I think if South Carolina had not done that, you would see him at more likely of a Penn State or Ohio State going north as opposed to coming south. Fred Johnson is an athletic linebacker. He is violent on film. South Carolina has struggled at the linebacker position with what we always label as SEC speed, sideline to sideline speed. I think that's a huge one, and may end up being the guy in the class. Played for a state championship, I think 2 weeks ago there for his team in Virginia. Again, that's one that South Carolina got on very early before anybody really knew of him. I think they were his first major offer. He picked up a couple after that. As you can see now, at least 24/7 Sports has moved him up to 109 nationally overall, regardless of position. So I think he's one that you instantly get very, very excited about. There's another linebacker they have coming in named Wendell Gregor right there, right below him. Again, another linebacker. I think that was big for South Carolina to upgrade their athletic ability at linebacker. Last year, they got a young man, a high 4-star, Grayson Howard out of Jacksonville, and you'll be able to pair these two young men with him. and South Carolina should be feeling a lot better about their situation at linebacker moving forward with the athleticism. And also, one thing you see there is the height: 6'2", 6'3", 6'2" for Gregory, 6'3" for Johnson, and Pup Howard 6'4". So you got some SEC looking dudes, and I think that's going to be very important. And then you overall you look at the offensive line class. You got Josiah Thompson, who I think on many sites is a 5-star. Cam Pringle is again another guy that everybody's very excited about. It's going to need a little bit of development. Josiah Thompson was actually Mr. Football in the state of South Carolina just this past week. I think that's a guy. So you talk about the offensive line, and South Carolina has to get better on the offensive line. They got to bring in more talented guys because they're just not holding up right now against defensive lines in the SEC.
Appreciate you being here, Will. You can catch Will's show at 107.5 The Game, various outlets across South Carolina. So for those folks that are outside the state, what's the best way to find you?
Yeah, go to two different ways. Go to 1075 The Game, or you go to your app store on your smartphone, and you can type in 1075 The Game and download our app. That's always a great way to do it. You can take us anywhere, listen on your smartphone. And of course, we have a live stream like this where you can go and watch every morning. And just like all these excited college football fans are weighing in, you can chat each and every morning. Go to YouTube, youtube.com, and search 1075 The Game. You'll find us and our smiling faces at 6 to 9 a.m. So a lot of good ways. You're right. You can also, if you're in the state of South Carolina, you can hear us on 100.3 The Game in Myrtle Beach on the Grand Strand, and 100.5 The Game in Florence. So a lot of different ways, and certainly we like to cut up and have fun. Tomorrow will be a little bit more centered on Christmas music, because it'll be one of our final days of the year.
Christmas music. So, like, do you like the old traditional standards, or where do you stand on Christmas music?
Oh man, I love it all. Matter of fact, picked up a new one today. My co-host, former South Carolina player Preston Thorne, introduced us to DMX rapping to Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer.
Okay, I'll have to check that one out.
Yeah, it's
What do you
good.
think of this playoff field?
I love it. Look, there's controversy. It's kind of a shame that this is the one year that we don't have the 12-team playoff. And I've said it many a time on our show. Look, I'm not a huge fan of. Again, I can go on for hours about how I think you should fix NIL and the transfer portal. But I'll also say this: if this is what we get, where Ohio State could have been or could have made a legitimate argument to be in, Georgia has a very legitimate argument to be in. We know about Florida State and their argument. Look, Mississippi and Missouri. I don't know how many teams would want to play them this time of year, the way especially Missouri, what they were doing with that team and Luther Burden, and I really like Eli Drinkowitz. It was a great year for college football on the field. It really was neat to see that much parity. We didn't have an elite team, and if this is what the transfer portal brings us, because I don't know, and maybe this is an outlier. Maybe this is just a random year where you just didn't have an elite team. But if this is what the transfer portal and NIL brings us, where every year we have 10 to 12 teams that are on the same level, because you're still seeing the same names, right? Like Washington's back for the second time. Texas is making its first time appearance. There's Alabama who's back, and of course Michigan's on 3 straight. But with that being said, Mark, I loved this season because you didn't have an elite team. I think if you'd put 11 teams in there, who knows who gets hot and runs 3 games, 2 games, whatever, and ends up winning. I'll sign up for this every year, even if it means the Gamecocks are struggling to find their way. So I love it. I love. I'm interested to watch Washington and Texas. I've got Alabama. Just you can't bet against Nick Saban, man. Can't. That dude, he probably had the most fun year he's had ever, because his team, the chips were down against him. We wrote him off. We went ahead and buried him. And just like Bill and Kill Bill, or what was the actor? Whatever the actor, just like Uma Thurman, he climbs out of the coffin there through the dirt and comes back to take everyone down. I think Nick Saban wins it. But man, what a great year! What a really, really great year. I think it was great for college football.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to dust off the live streams after the South Florida and Texas games, because I sure wasn't writing them off. I didn't think it was necessarily going to be a banner Alabama season, but I picked them to go to the championship game, and I wasn't writing them off after one loss because he's just done this way too many times. It's too
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, he was. I think it was the South Florida game that was so ugly that we all
Yeah.
went, "Oh, this team's bad. Look at it. They've got 2 or 3 losses, and somehow they found a way." And I'm sure Nick Saban, had more fun hyping up or talking to a team that we'd all written off. But again, I love it. I love it. I love the Pac-12. I hate that for them because they were competitive this
Yeah.
year. The Big Ten had several teams, obviously led by Michigan, and then of course Florida State and the ACC. Would have been interesting to see Louisville not lose to Kentucky, and would have Louisville been able to get in if they beat Florida State? Probably not. Had if they beaten Kentucky and Florida State. Just a really fun year all the way around. And I hope that's what we have going forward in college football.
Cool. Will, thank you so much for dropping by. Good to see you, man. Hope
Always,
everything's
man.
going
Good luck,
well.
and I know it's a fun day. It's a shame for somebody who grew up with this day.
Yeah.
It's a little sad, but yeah, it's still college football. We'll still enjoy it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Will. Have a good day, man.
Take care, buddy.